Imagine a bride dressed in red, her hair adorned with phoenix pins, her face painted with the delicate blush of wedding rouge. She is carried in a traditional bridal sedan, accompanied by the sound of firecrackers and ceremonial music. But there is no groom waiting for her in the flesh. He is long dead, and she too may already be a spirit. Welcome to the haunting and deeply symbolic world of ghost marriages, a practice rooted in ancient Chinese beliefs about family, continuity, and the afterlife. In this spectral ceremony, the living and the dead, or sometimes the dead and the dead, are bound together in matrimonial union, not for love, but for legacy, balance, and spiritual peace. Ghost marriage, or Minghun, meaning marriage in the netherworld, is one of China's most enigmatic and misunderstood rituals. While to modern sensibilities it may seem macabre or even superstitious, this practice reveals profound truths about how traditional Chinese society viewed the cosmos, kinship, and the spiritual obligations of the living toward the departed. In this video, we will journey through the origins, rituals, evolving interpretations, and cultural significance of ghost marriage. We will uncover how it began, what it meant to the families involved, and why such a practice endured across dynasties, and in some places, still lingers today. To understand ghost marriage, we must begin with the foundational beliefs of early Chinese cosmology and ancestral worship. In the worldview of ancient China, life did not end with death. It merely changed form. The Chinese spiritual tradition envisioned the world as consisting of three realms: the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. The dead did not vanish. Rather, they transitioned into ancestral spirits who remained deeply intertwined with the affairs of the living. These spirits required offerings, attention, and above all, inclusion within a family line to remain at peace. Without proper rites, a soul could become a hungry ghost, a lonely, wandering spirit marginalized from the ancestral cult, unable to reincarnate or find rest. The importance of having descendants to perform rituals was paramount, especially for males, who carried on the family name and household altar. It is within this context that ghost marriages arose, not as mere superstition, but as a solution to a spiritual and social crisis. What would become of the soul of an unmarried dead person? The origins of ghost marriage are difficult to pinpoint precisely, but archaeological and textual evidence suggests that the practice may stretch as far back as the Zhou dynasty, 1046 to 256 BCE. Inscriptions on oracle bones, burial items, and early funerary texts hint at symbolic unions between the dead and by the Han dynasty, 206 BCE to 220 CE. The belief in a richly populated and bureaucratic afterlife had taken firm hold. One of the earliest clear references comes from the Book of Later Han, Hohanshu, which recounts a strange tale involving a man who died unmarried and whose spirit appeared in a dream to request a bride. His family complied, and the ghost was appeased. These early stories were not rare. They reflected a growing belief that marriage was not merely a social contract between individuals, but a cosmic necessity, a means to maintain harmony between generations, both seen and unseen. Ghost marriages varied greatly depending on region, dynasty, and local custom. But by the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, and especially the Song dynasty, 960 to 1279 CE, the rituals had taken on more formalized shapes. Typically, ghost marriages were arranged by the family of the deceased, seeking to find a suitable match for their departed son, or less commonly, daughter. Sometimes the match was with another dead person. At other times, a living bride or groom was married to the dead. Matchmakers, often older women with spiritual knowledge, played a key role. They consulted with mediums, performed divinations using ancient techniques like the I Ching, or communicated directly with the dead through spirit writing or dreams. If a match was agreed upon, spiritually and socially, the families would exchange betrothal gifts, just as they would in a traditional marriage. The families would negotiate a bride price, select an auspicious date, and prepare offerings. The wedding itself closely mirrored a traditional Chinese marriage, but with spectral modifications. A red paper effigy or wooden tablet representing the dead groom or bride stood in place of the physical person. In some cases, ancestral tablets or burial urns were used. The bride might be led to the groom's house in a red sedan chair, accompanied by drums and firecrackers. After the ceremony, she would become part of the family, expected to participate in ancestor worship and, in some cases, to live a chaste life as the widow of a ghost. In rare but documented cases, a living groom was married to a dead bride, often to honor a prearranged betrothal made before the bride's death. The groom's family could then claim the dowry, while ensuring the bride's spirit had a proper place in their ancestral shrine. Behind every ghost marriage lay a set of social and familial pressures that made such a practice not only acceptable, but sometimes necessary. At the heart of Chinese society stood the Confucian principle of filial piety, xiao, the obligation of children to honor parents, both in life and after death. But this duty extended in both directions. Parents were also expected to ensure that their children, even in death, had a proper place in the social and spiritual order. For a son to die unmarried was seen as a tragedy, not just emotionally, but cosmologically. He had no descendants to carry on his name, no wife to honor his memory, no presence in the family's ancestral rites. His ghost would be adrift, untethered. Ghost marriage solved this problem. By posthumously marrying their dead son, the family could legitimize his spirit, give him a wife to care for his soul, and, through symbolic or adopted children, continue the family line. The case of the ghost bride is more complex. In a patriarchal society where women were often married out of their natal homes and into their husband's family, an unmarried daughter who died posed a spiritual dilemma. Without marriage, she could not be properly enshrined in the ancestral altar of either her birth family or a husband's household. She risked becoming a wandering ghost, neither here nor there. Thus, some families arranged ghost marriages for their deceased daughters to ensure they had a proper spiritual resting place. This also allowed the family to maintain social respectability and fulfill their obligations to the dead. In some cases, a living woman would be married to a dead man, not out of coercion, but as an act of loyalty or love. There are recorded cases, particularly in the late Qing and Republican eras, of young women who chose to become ghost widows, committing to a life of chastity in honor of a deceased fiancé. Throughout China's imperial history, ghost marriage existed in a shadow zone, rarely officially sanctioned, but often tolerated. The Tang and Song dynasties had legal codes that prohibited certain forms of ghost marriage, especially those involving living participants. Yet enforcement was uneven. Local magistrates often turned a blind eye, understanding the cultural imperatives behind the rituals. By the Ming, 1368 to 1644, and Qing, 1644 to 1912 dynasties, ghost marriage had become widespread, particularly in northern and central China, where ancestral worship was deeply entrenched. Imperial law occasionally attempted to suppress the practice, especially when it involved fraud or abuse, but the ritual persisted in rural villages and family compounds. With the fall of the Qing in 1912 and the rise of the Republic, ghost marriage came under increasing scrutiny. Reformers and intellectuals, influenced by Western science and modernist ideas, condemned the practice as feudal, backward, and even dangerous. By the 20th century, the Chinese government had formally outlawed ghost marriage. Yet it did not disappear. Even today, in some rural areas of Shanxi, Shaanxi, Hebei, and Henan, underground ghost marriages are still conducted, often involving human trafficking, grave robbing, or the buying and selling of female corpses. These modern abuses have given ghost marriage a dark reputation, far removed from its original spiritual intentions. Beyond the historical record, ghost marriage lives on in the rich tapestry of Chinese folklore, opera, and literature. In countless ghost stories, a lonely spirit returns from the afterlife to demand a marriage left unfulfilled. These stories are both eerie and poignant. A common theme is the returning bride, who appears in a young man's dream, asking for a union that fate denied. In one famous Ming Dynasty tale, a scholar unknowingly marries a beautiful woman he meets on the road, only to discover that she is a ghost seeking closure. Their union brings peace to her soul, and sometimes fortune to the living. In traditional Chinese opera, the ghost bride appears in symbolic red, the color of both weddings and sacrifice. Her story is often tragic, but with redemptive power. These performances reflect the deep emotional resonance of ghost marriage, a ritual that bridges love, duty, and the boundaries of life and death. Ghost marriage, at first glance, seems a practice of paradoxes, a joyous wedding in the absence of life, a union in the shadow of death. But to dismiss it as mere superstition is to miss its deeper meanings. In the world of ancient China, the line between the living and the dead was not a wall, but a doorway, one that required ritual, remembrance, and relationship to stay open. Ghost marriage was a way of keeping that door from closing. It expressed the continuity of family, the sacred duty of remembrance, and the belief that spiritual balance required social and cosmic order. It was a pact not only between individuals, but between generations, seen and unseen. Today, as modern China moves ever further from its ancestral traditions, ghost marriage survives mostly in folklore and the margins. But its echoes remain, in the stories told on festival nights, in the red dresses of opera ghosts, and in the memory of a time when even death could not sever the ties that bind. In the great tapestry of Chinese civilization, ghost marriage is a thread woven from reverence, ritual, and the undying hope that no soul, however lost, should remain alone.